Well met, everyone. I am Rich DeLitch, and this is my review of The Ghosts of Saltmarsh. This is an adventure book, some new content official by Wizards of the Coast. I am reviewing the digital version of it. I purchased this on D&D Beyond for $29.99. Actually, I put in some kind of coupon code, so I got this for just under $25. It is a recent release. It came out officially yesterday, I think. So let's take it through my review process, and hopefully at the end of this all, you might be a little better informed as to whether or not this is some content that is a good fit for you and your gaming group. There will be some differences as far as, especially when I talk the first category of layout, design, and editing, just simply because the readability of something on screen, depending on what screen you're looking at it on. Of course, if I'm looking at it on my phone versus a larger monitor, smaller monitor, versus a book as a book, right? So the font sizes might be a little different, but overall the aesthetic is the same. It's all there. It's going to have that same detail, and whatever I review and rate the layout, design, and editing, know with confidence that if you were to flip through the book, you're going to get the exact same level of detail and the good bits or the bad bits, however I review it. And the reason why I say that with confidence is, although this is a digital version of it, I purchased it on D&D Beyond just quite simply because I want to have the content here because it's what I use for my prep work in D&D. But on my shelf, I've got 8, 10, 12 books, DMG, Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, Xanathar's, Volo's Guide. I've got Out of the Abyss, Curse of Strahd, Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. And as I flip through those pages of the actual book, simultaneously, since I have the legendary bundle of D&D Beyond, which gives me everything, I've looked page for page, and the content is identical to the point of when something's italicized or in bold font in the actual physical book, it's italicized and in bold font on screen. So as I said, yeah, there's going to be some layout differences depending on how the columns need to fit and shift. But for the most part, when I say the spacing is good, when the font is good, you know what you're going to get, regardless of which copy or version of content you wish to get this in, digital or an actual physical thing. That being said, the physical book itself, I've been to my local gaming store, I've thumbed through the books and various things like that. It is the same build quality that you can expect from Wizards of the Coast. Everything is going to be the same. The cover is nice and glossy. It has that beautiful, hard, tactile feel to it. The binding is really good. The pages, the insert, all that stuff, it's well built. So know with confidence, if you buy the book, you're going to get good stuff. What we're here for, though, is content. And for that, let's delve into it. First, layout, design, and editing. There's an introduction. As I said, this is identical to what you're going to find in the actual book. You've got this cool piece of art here, kind of showing us, reminding us that we're looking at a water-based type of adventure book piece of work. There's some good sections here, giving you the credits. I like that it mentions credits to the original because a lot of the adventures, kind of the module stuff in here, does come from stuff from 2-3 decades ago, original D&D. So nice touch that it gave all this stuff here. When we actually look into the book itself and we get into the various sections, you're going to get the tried and true layout that we would be familiar with. So I can simply just say for layout, design, and editing, you're going to get 2 out of 2 points. It's perfect. There's nothing wrong here. So what often happens when I'm reviewing the content where I download a PDF from a single creator on DM's Guild, oftentimes why you'll see that I'll obsess about the little details and the nuances there is quite simply because you have a person, a single entity that has to create the content. They've got to write the stories. They got to write the lore, the detail. They got to wrangle in the mechanics. They have to send it out. They also have to oftentimes do their own editing. They've got to do their own layout stuff. They may not have the skill of an editor. And also, sometimes you can be too engrossed in it that until you let someone else read it, you don't notice those spelling errors. They may not have the software to be able to lay things out accordingly. When we're looking at official content, regardless of how we're looking at it on screen or in an actual book, there's so many people involved here, right? There's a certain level of quality control that Wizards of the Coast is going to have with their official content. It's assumed and expected that this stuff, all this content, has been funneled to a designer, to an editor, and they've laid it out in graphic design. So therefore, they've ensured that when you have a heading or indicating a chapter, this looks good, it stands out. There's a nice little green dividing line. The font is very consistent. The spacing is consistent. The leading, the kerning, all of the things that I've obsessed about in other reviews. It's expected and assumed, and they met expectations, that all of the layout, the design, this is probably put into a specific Adobe product or something like that, where everything is just mathematically lined up for you. So you should not see any errors. I don't see any spelling errors. There's nothing off. Everything is as it should be, and it's very familiar. It's the same. No matter what book I opened up on D&D Beyond, it's all going to look the same with the same letter format in the same way. When you get into a table, it's going to have this same exact look. So, as I said, 2 out of 2. It's kind of a given. It's an official product. It should be right, and it is right. Let's move on into art. Now, high praise for layout, design, and editing, right? Art, I'm a fan. Outstanding, beautiful artwork, among the best I've seen in regards to concept art, movie, video gamey. Outstanding. It gives us a good vibe, good theme. I love the Kraken thing in the back, and the ship is going to go down. You've got this rowboat with some adventures in the front with whatever, Sahagin or some seafaring creature. Really cool. Once we get into the book itself, you have the introduction of the place, the village of Saltmarsh. I like this look because, it's a port town. It's along the coast. Shows some adventurers kind of being held up at the front gates or door by some kind of a guard. But in the background, you get a feel. It reminds us of sort of that port city, that port town. Very cool. But notice as we scroll through, there's no more artwork. You've got some NPCs here, but there's not a small little snippet, a little portrait, a little face, something like that. Just as I said, high praise for the layout, design, and editing because it's an official product. There's a lot of people it's gone through. There's a lot of people involved here. I'm sure they've got a good amount of stock artwork. Something could have been thrown in here. But there's nothing there. When we get into some other parts where artwork should be present, like monsters, a lot of the monsters are not here. The ones that you do see, where an assassin vine is one of the monsters that's used somewhere within this book, but that is an actual monster that was already brought about in Tomb of Annihilation, so you have artwork. Whereas this guy, the Amphisbaena, or whatever his name is, if I click on him, he's from the Hidden Shrine of whatever. There's no art there, but as we scroll through, the Bard, I don't like the artwork anyway, but it's kind of simple, and it's just like taking from some player portrait type of thing. You have Bodak, there's nothing. I'm not sure what this artwork belongs to. You have the Bullywug Croaker. This is new to Ghosts of Saltmarsh, as is the Bullywug Royal. Just take a Bullywug and maybe throw a crown on him, or throw a little bit thicker armor or something for the Croaker, whatever it may be. There's no artwork. The Deep Scion, look how many monsters we have, and there's no artwork accompanying it. So that's a big thing. I would normally, because of that, I guess, while I want to be as objective as possible, I have to consider whose content I'm reading. And in that, I'm looking at an official book, someone that has the resources, that has the means to not see that artwork. I would have just straight flat out said, wow, the cover's beautiful. And I'm sure within the adventures, there's a few different points that there's some nice artwork. I would have said art's going to be 0. But when you do get into some of the adventures, I do like that you do get the maps as is necessary. I believe a lot of these were done by Dyson Logos. I follow him on Instagram. So you do get a lot of really nice maps. The cartography within this book is top-notch. It's beautifully made, well done. The other cool thing is, while I did say that content's content, it's identical, right? I mentioned that at the very beginning. I tried to sell you on that point of saying that be confident should you get the book or digital, you're going to get the same thing. This is the only thing I'm not 100% certain on. Here we have the DM's version of this map, which has the legend, basically. So you get a bunch of numbers, and then they, of course, reference some things. If I click, it says View Player Version. There is another map that I can print out, which doesn't have all those points, so that the PCs won't know, hey, there's something important about this forest, whereas on the DM side, I know that location 29, there must be something there. I don't know if you get 2 versions in the actual physical book. If that becomes a make or break for you and you want to know that, leave some comments. and I will go out to my local gaming store within the next day or two. I'll thumb through the book, and I will confirm it and reply back, okay? But back onto the art. The cartography is outstanding. I like that you get 2 versions of everything, where there's the version for the DM to kind of hold behind the screen, and then the version to give to your player. So that's really well done. And also, when we get into one of the strengths of the book, which I'll go over in content, of course, is the ships. Every ship here doesn't only just have like its own, they're treated like NPCs. It has its own like monster manual stat card, which is beautiful. And then every ship, there's a galley. It shows you the main deck and lower deck. As we get into the more complicated ones, like the full sailing ship or the warship, you have all of the interesting parts. That's a nice touch. So because you have wonderful cartography and the ships, which is an important section in this whole thing, the art is there. I am going to up it from a 0, where my expectation is there should have been a lot better art. I'm going to give art 1 point. Let's get into the good bits, the content. So, what do we have? Let me go over the introduction. Welcome to the Ghosts of Saltmarsh. This book collects 7 D&D adventures, each famous for their unique challenges, for their deadly threats, and for embracing the danger and wonder of the high seas. Some of these adventures initially charted their courses in the earliest days of D&D's history. If you remember that credit section I showed you in the beginning, some of these adventures pull from as early as 1981, I think. Now, everything was brought up into 5th edition. Are you getting an identical rehash? I can't confirm because I haven't read through in exhaustive detail every adventure, and I certainly haven't run them yet. And I don't remember if I ran that or played that in 1981. But everything it says right here, in each case, these tales of plunder and peril have been updated for the current edition of the game. Along with these adventures returns one of D&D's most famous seaside settings, the port town of Saltmarsh. You're getting some good bits when you're dealing with the actual village town of this place, where it's sort of the setting, the basis, the foundation for many of these adventures to occur. And then you get the sea and its threats aren't unique to Saltmarsh. To help launch explorations across the wild waves, you have the appendix of Ships and the Sea, kind of what I just showed you when I showed you those pictures, where here you're presented with a toolbox for ocean-bound adventures. That's a wonderful, beautiful section. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's digest and get into the content individually. So, what are we really getting here? First, there's 8 chapters. Chapters 2 through 8 are specific individual adventures, module style. Chapter 1 is... let me go back on that real quick. Chapters 2 through 8 are adventures module style in that they handhold the DM. Okay, I'm not going to say 100% railroaded, because the DM, of course, always has liberty to kind of go a little bit off the beaten path and manipulate a few things as he sees fit, especially if he's doing it in prep time. But they handhold the DM because, let's say I click on one of these adventures. As I go through it, it will give me things. When they go to the haunted house and they travel to it, I read this. When the PCs make various checks, an investigation check in the garden or a survival check or whatever, it shows me what kind of monsters might be there. As they do these things, choose your own adventure style. They go left, read this. They go here, read that. So it gives you all the details. It doesn't just give you a paragraph of cool lore and story and then leave you on your own as the DM to figure out how to interpret that. It tells you through all of these adventures, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and chapter 8, exactly how to run the whole thing. Okay? So that's what those give you. Chapter 1, Saltmarsh, is entirely on all the details of that place, of the town, kind of the initial starting point. Okay? So with this, you get more fuel for the Dungeon Master. You get things for the imagination. I personally really enjoy it because I'm not trying to pat my own back and say I'm super creative, but my style of DMing is I like to create this stuff and create my own worlds and my own content. I don't like to... you see it if you've ever watched any of my fun fights videos and things like that. I don't like to just constrain myself to what's given. I like to read something and think, oh, that's really neat. I want to run with that and do something with that. And because of that, I like the way this is presented. But that being said, that may not be for everyone. If you're looking for Saltmarsh to provide the content as you would in a module, where tell me exactly what the NPC does, what they say, and how they react. You're not going to get that in Chapter 1. What you'll get in Chapter 1 of Saltmarsh is the overall layout of the place. What is Saltmarsh? First and foremost, it was a village, I believe, in the Kingdom of Keoland, which is from Greyhawk, all the way back 1st edition D&D. As I said, it's been brought over into the 5th edition rule set. Also, one thing it does, not just in the Chapter 1 Saltmarsh, but through all the adventures, the entire book, it does a really good job of keeping it kind of world-free, in that it tells you and gives you hints and tips and tricks, and sometimes blatantly just says, this is how you should do it, of how to bring these places, the adventures, Saltmarsh itself, into your own world. Saltmarsh is a port city. As long as you have a place that's near the coastline and it's near water, it's going to fit for you. You can use all the little nuances and details here, and it'll fit within your world. In the adventure specifically, it'll often tell you, this is how you can bring it into Eberron. This is how you can bring this specific adventure into a place within Forgotten Realms, and so on. So it does a good job where, even though the background of Saltmarsh began as a Greyhawk place, it does a good thing of giving you kind of that world-free setting. So it gives you the basics of Saltmarsh. It tells you about the politics and the various factions that are within. And as I said, the layout's great. You can just read through what they're about. There's some key NPCs that are within, and then because I have the efficiency of the interface of D&D Beyond, I can mouse over this noble, and I know that Ada Oland is a female human. She's a noble. So I now have an NPC card should I want to have her be attacked or something like that, or bring her into the game. Now, in the book, of course, you're not going to have a pop-up box, so this will just be in bold, but it just does a good job of, it's talking about a certain faction. It gives you some key NPCs within that faction, and it tells you what they are, so you can look into a monster manual or other book to figure out what they might be with stats and whatnot. And then the cool thing about these NPCs is it gives you some personality traits, ideals, bonds. You'll notice these things are familiar to what you would see in the backgrounds for your PC. And the good part about that is it's, what did Shrek say? He's like an onion, right? A bunch of different layers. And it adds some depth. So that if I do want to use the NPC, even though the whole section, Chapter 1 of Saltmarsh, is some fuel and the DM needs to run with it, it does a good job of giving you some little bits that you can add on to, so that when I bring her to the table, she's not just an NPC with a name, she's got some gray areas to her, right? That's the strength of the characters, whether in the novels or the TV show of Game of Thrones. It's not so black and white where, oh, she's a human female noble, she maybe is good, I don't want to fight her. You may interact. She's chaotic good. There may be a noble in here, or an NPC, like, for example, the Scarlet Brotherhood has this guy. He's a lawful evil assassin. Well, he's got these things as well. And by creating this type of stuff, yes, you're free to do whatever you want at the DM because it's not giving you the full module format of this is how he reacts. But those layers make him sort of more of a gray character than just pure black and white, where if you have a good aligned group, it isn't just, oh, this guy's evil, let's kill him. These type of things provide some depth that maybe his goal and the goal of the group is one and the same. So even though he's evil, I might work with him. So that's a nice touch that they do that for all of the different NPCs that are within the faction. So that's what you get there. And then beyond the different factions, as I said, NPCs, you've got some different charts of almost like hooks or just little interesting bits about the various factions that might come into play and things you can use if you want to just randomize it. And then as you move down further, you'll get the overview of Saltmarsh, which shows you the law and order. So what's the military like? What are the defensives like? Who are, when I met at the gate, that picture of the town guard, what does he look like? If I commit a crime, the idea here of Saltmarsh is, yes, it's the foundation for the adventures, but if you don't want to run the adventures, and you just want to have your PCs use this sort of port coastal city or this coastal town, you can use this because now as your PCs linger in the city and the town for 2-3 days, you quickly learn, here's some things that are considered crimes. Commerce, what is their imports, exports, how do they make money, how do they eat? Smuggling. It talks about, sort of how does currency and gold flow in and out of the city? What brings in trade? And therefore, if you have a rogue in your party, there might be some fuel here that you can run with as to how he might be able to set up a thieves guild or maybe set up a black market, type of thing. So it has a lot of cool bits like that. You have the docks. You have your adventure boards, right? The PCs approach this new town. They want to see, hey, is there anything going on? Are there any adventures or quests going on? Or I want to speak to the innkeepers or anything of interest. Here, in the docks, you roll a d10, and you might roll a 5 that says that tiefling who's looking to buy crocodile skulls can't be up to anything good. That's just a rumor spreading around the docks to kind of illustrate that point of how Saltmarsh, this whole chapter, is more fuel than it is. If this was in an adventure, it would say you meet a tiefling, DC 18 investigate to understand or learn that she's trying to buy some crocodile skulls, and if the PCs treat her this way, read this. Here, it just simply leaves it at that. You run with that. But what that creates for you is a means of saying, well, I start asking questions. Who's this tiefling? I now need to stat up an NPC. What do these crocodile skulls mean? Is the nearby region of Saltmarsh overrun with crocodiles? Is that a problem? Is it something we need to fix? Do the crocodile skulls have any sort of religious significance as like a holy thing or, whatever it may be? So it gives you a bunch of little bits, little seeds that you can later plant into something. And that's what I feel the Chapter 1 Saltmarsh is all about. Yes, as I said, it's the foundation for the adventures for a lot of them, but it just gives you a bunch of little bits. The other cool thing is the adventures always conclude with something where it may bring you back to Saltmarsh. So kind of bringing in those official adventure parts and then bringing it back into Saltmarsh, you can start creating some more content further on. So that's what this provides you. I showed you this map earlier. You see the actual Saltmarsh itself, what it's about, places of interest. It also gives you the region around it, which is really neat. There's Saltmarsh there, the region around it where there may be some interesting bits along the roads and pathways. Here's the various points of interest that are outside of the region of Saltmarsh. So just fuel for quests, for story, for adventure. It kind of mentions various links where the region outside has a haunted house. That's linked to this adventure. So if you're initially just focusing on Saltmarsh only, but later on through the sessions you realize, you know what, I think I want to funnel them into this adventure now. It's right there for you. It kind of shows how they link up. So that's just a really good chapter. All in all, I think it gives you a lot of good info, so long as you're willing to put in a little bit of detail work on your own as a DM to be able to figure out and extrapolate from the information that's given. Now, based on the length of me talking about just Chapter 1, I'm not going to do the same thing for Chapters 2 through 8. But also, most importantly, because I don't want to give you any spoilers as to what these are. I'll just quickly mention that sort of what they are. The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh is an adventure for 4 to 6 first level characters. So you have that, and what happens is the PCs investigate a haunted house. Really cool. It does a good job of giving you a conclusion of when they're done, what happens next. Maybe it brings you into Saltmarsh so they can still linger, but it gives you some tidbits as to how you can create more content. Specifically, the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh does lead into, if you want to investigate further, the next adventure. So in this regard, you don't have a purely standalone adventure. Now, this whole thing, these adventures are not like something like Curse of Strahd. It isn't meant to be an entire campaign overarching thing where you begin at this level and by the time you're done with Strahd and that whole book, your characters are done. Kind of it's over. Everyone make new characters for a new adventure or a new campaign. Here they can be sort of standalone, but 3 of them, the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, when you're done with it, if you investigate further, does lead into the Danger at Dunwater. And that's why it says this one is designed for 4 to 6 third level characters, where you're investigating how these lizard folk are starting to get some increased firepower, and that's something that the people of Saltmarsh are concerned with. And then this one sort of ends its entire journey, if you take that further, into the final enemy, where here it says this is designed for 4 to 6 characters of 7th level. So you have these 3 adventures that do tie in together. So there's a longer arching story there. It's definitely going to take you more than one session to get through all of that. Whereas the other one, Salvage Operation, this is designed for 4 to 6 4th level characters where you're investigating a missing ship that's sort of just recently been identified again, and the owner believes that something important's on that ship, and he's hiring people to go investigate it. You have the Isle of the Abbey. This is designed for a party of 4 to 6 5th level characters. This is, you're supposed to clean out an island so that you can put a lighthouse can be built there. So you want to investigate and ensure that the place is safe to do so. And then you have Tamarat's Fate. This is designed for 4 to 6 9th level characters. So you can see that you've got some sort of one-shots here, but they can still tie into things. It kind of leaves you some good bits on the conclusions. I'm not going to go over them as to how you might be able to bring it all back to Saltmarsh or maybe the outlying region. And then you have the Styes, which is designed for 4 to 6 11th level characters. This one is pretty long, as you can see here. There's different parts. So this is definitely, even as a standalone, it's not just one night of gameplay, unless you play for 35 hours straight. So there's a lot of good bits there in the adventures as well. So after all of that, what else do we have? I'm going to skip over the ships and sea because that's the best part, and just very quickly say there are 6 new magic items. I think there's 6. Charm of Plant Command, Curse Luckstone, Helm of Underwater Action, Pipe of Remembrance, Pressure Capsule, and a worshipping statuette. I've moused over those. You can rewind the video, pause it if you want to see all the details of that. There's not a lot here, and there's no artwork accompanying it, so not a lot there for magic items. As far as monsters and NPCs, there's a good bit here. What I did earlier is I opened up D&D Beyond, and I went to my monster tab, and then I filtered by sources, Ghosts of Saltmarsh, and said filter. And here you can see, yes, I said Ghosts of Saltmarsh, but some of these monsters, like this Assassin Vine, it's in Tomb of Annihilation. That bard is from Volo's Guide. These are monsters and NPCs that are in the various adventures and within the book, but they're not exclusive to Ghosts of Saltmarsh. But I counted through these 4 pages, like this Amphiz whatever, the Barnacle Bess, the Bullywug Croaker, and the Bullywug Royal. I counted through all of these. Of all 4 pages, you have, I believe it's 54 entirely new monsters. So independent of the adventures and all of the other stuff in the book, if you just want to find some cool new monsters, most of them, of course, are going to be themed to something aquatic or water-based, I would assume. You've got 54 new monsters here, so that's pretty cool. Now, let's get into the best part of ships and the sea. You don't want to run anything, whether you're that DM that just doesn't want to have to come up with your own details, even though the chapter on the village of Saltmarsh gives you some good bits that you can run with. You don't want to run anything there. You don't want to run any of the adventures. You just know in your world you've got some water stuff. Now, all that being said, I should have said this maybe in the very beginning. It's kind of obvious. If your world is, boiling seas, inhospitable, not able to be traveled and traversed, and you have nothing to do with water and coastlines and aquatic stuff, this is not going to be a fit for you. There's nothing here that's for you, okay? Maybe you can take this and change it into flying ships and do some, DM finesse work to make that happen, but for the most part, this is all waterborne, water-based stuff. So, if you don't want to run anything in here, but you want to create ships, or you want to have ships become a big part of your campaign or your world, it explains how the size of ships work. What is their space and their carrying capacity? What type of things can they hold? And it does a good job of this stuff. Travel pace, ability scores. So here's another really cool part. It has now given ability scores to ships. And what that does is it kind of personifies them, where it treats them like an NPC. It gives them some value and some worth beyond just simply it gets you from point A to point B across the water. So the strength of a ship expresses its size and weight. Dexterity represents a ship's ease of handling. A ship's constitution covers its durability and the quality of its construction. But intelligence, wisdom, charisma are figured to be a 0, right? Because it's not a sentient thing. It's just an object. But it does a good job and stuff like that. It shows you that it's generally invulnerable or immune to blinded charm, death, and exhaustion, things like that. So what's cool in that is the ships have a dexterity now. If I was to scroll down here real quick, this galley has a dex of 4, which is terrible, right? But we're talking about big objects. The cool part about that in giving it stats is it can allow these ships to be a part of this real fantastical sort of adventure and story in your world. If a wizard is on an enemy ship and he's on the deck and he starts slinging fireballs, you can kind of make, just as a PCs would, make a dex check to see if they, evasion rogue the fireball. You could make a dex check at a -3 here because of the galley and see if maybe you're able to try and navigate your way out of the fireball. So it makes things sort of relate, and it gives some worth and just more nuance and detail to these ships. Imagine like a comic movie, Thor. There's a barbarian that's in the water, and you're approaching him with your ship, and he tries to literally want to push the ship as like an opposed strength check, or push or grapple, that type of thing. I now have a strength to a ship that I can roll against, which is some cool flavor and some touch there, because normally that wouldn't be there. It's like, well, I don't know how to adjudicate that, because the barbarian's level 20 and he's like larger than life epic guy, and he's got all this strength and he's demigod status, but I don't know how to wrangle that in. The ship pushes him, I guess, but it's just cool. Instead of just keeping it dumbed down to, it's a big ship, here's the hardness, here's the AC, you blow it up or not. Now I've actually got some stats that I can kind of work off of and work from. Here it shows you the various components that make up the ship. There's weapons. It shows you, as I said earlier, and I showed you, you've got the galley. So you have the different ships, what it's made up of. It shows you an example of what type of crew might be on board it with, yes, I'm mousing over it here, whereas in the book it's just going to kind of inform you as to where to go, but it shows you want to look at the bandit captain. He might be the captain of a galley. You might look at commoners and guards, because they will make up the 12 engineers and the 42 sailors that are on it. It shows you on the main deck. Here's some weapons it has. Refer to the DMG Chapter 8 to show you what those weapons are about. But then you get, just like in the Monster Manual, a cool stat card that has everything here for you. You can print this out, give it to your PCs, and it's now a worthy reward when they gain a galley, when they acquire something. They have a cool little map of it. They can draw, little boxes to show who's sleeping where, and, things of that nature. And it does that for every single one. The keel boat. It does it for the longship. It does that for the rowboat even. It does it for the bigger ships, the sailing ship and then the warship. It has all of these different details. And it also shows you when you're using the ship to fight, on its turn, it can do these things and take these actions. It uses these weapons. It shows you what their plus to hit is and their range and how much damage. It just gives you, it's like a monster. So by adding that level in, it's now something that's very playable. So really, really good addition. Officers and crew. It tells you what their officers might be. And from an NPC perspective, it shows you the best captains have high intelligence and charisma scores. He's probably going to have intimidation and persuasion skills proficient. The quartermaster relies on knowledge of nautical charts and a study of weather and sea conditions. He's got his own navigator tools, and he's really good at the nature skill. So little bits of how they might be able to help you interact with another NPC. They kind of show you just a little bit there as to what they're real people, right? They're not just things on the ship that do nothing like mindless robots. So really good job in that regard. It brings about the loyalty quality stuff from the Dungeon Master's Guide, where if you don't feed them well, if you don't give them enough rest, if they've been at sea for too long and on that damn ship, they need to get out. They need to get off port for a moment, give them 2-3 nights of just rest and good ale at a tavern and let them have fun. Because otherwise it can affect their quality and just their general state of mind, which might lead into, using the DMG, making some actual persuasion and intimidation things to see if you can keep them in check. Otherwise, mutiny's going to happen. They're going to leave. They're going to betray you. And it doesn't just mention it as a paragraph that mutiny's a thing on your ship, figure it out. No, it gives you some tangible numbers and things you can roll and check against to figure out if that happens. Upgrades are an incredible addition. They're expensive. They cost 15,000 gold, and they require 1d4 weeks of work. But I'll read a couple to you. The churning hull. A tempest rages within these rune-etched iron chains. Raiders and pirates who operate under the blessings of a storm god sometimes make use of this upgrade. By draping the chains over a ship's hull, the storm's fury thrashes into the water around it. Basically, all things within 210 feet of the ship, other than the ship itself, of course, considers this difficult terrain. You have a living vessel. Vines covered in thick leaves hang over the side of this thing, as the wood runs with fresh sap when damaged. It gains a +2 bonus to all constitution checks or saving throws, and as long as the ship has at least 1 hit point, it regains 10 hit points. Your ship regenerates by this living vessel. It's this really cool, larger-than-life effect to these things, but it just adds just so much cool flavor and story. So I love that it adds these type of things in. It gives you something to look forward to, just as you'd want to advance a weapon or you'd want to get better armor. It makes it gives the ship value. There's these things here that you want to keep the ship. You want to keep it in shape and keep it intact, and you're looking forward to making it better and better. It gives you movement upgrades. It gives you weapon things. I mean, in movement, you've got dragon sails and screaming sails. Just listen to how that sounds. You've got explosive rounds, concussive rounds. You're basically like adding a rocket launcher to your ship. How cool are those type of upgrades, right? You've got these figureheads. Listen to this. This figurehead depicts an armored knight. As an action, the ship can activate this item, causing it to animate as an iron golem. You have an iron golem on your ship that can activate. I mean, how cool is that stuff? It gives you details on how to handle ships in combat. And it mentions how your crew has a big part in that. Where the amount of crew, as your crew starts dying, casualties, it may affect the ability for your ship to take its actions because you just don't have enough people to man the appropriate levels, the appropriate weapons and such. So really good job in that regard as well. It gives you crash damage. It shows you what happens when you're crashing your ship. Traveling at sea, what are some downtime things you can do? Raising morale, foraging. It doesn't just say, as I've said before, when you're trying to raise morale so that there's not mutiny, it tells you make a check against the crew's quality. It's modified by that. You're going to make a persuasion check. It gives you physical, tangible things that you can do at the table, dice that you can roll to figure this stuff out instead of just, yeah, that makes sense on a ship. It gives you things to take with you. So really good in that regard. There's a bunch of different hazards and stuff like that. And as you get down into this stuff, you have various environments. So now we're not just dealing with the ship itself, but now this is just purely water-based travel. You have blue holes. What is that? Well, it's this sort of sinkhole that's at the bed, the bed of the sea. But roll a d10 and you see there's things going on down in there. Maybe there's magic items you can find. Really cool touch. You have coral reefs. You have various currents and how they affect travel. Depth. It talks about depth at this distance. You can't, there's no light down there, Pressure and temperature, optional stuff, but you can have it affect iron and steel. Plate mail is actually starting to implode on itself because you're so deep. Cool points again. You have Eldritch Mist. You've got Ghost Fog, containing the souls of murdered victims whose bodies were thrown into sea. Cool, but a DC 15 Intelligence Arcana check reveals that the mist is Ghost Fog. And as every hour that a ship is in Ghost Fog, roll any die you want, and on an even number, spawn some specters. You're adding in, yes, the DM, just like with the village of Saltmarsh itself, it's giving you some fuel and some things to run with, but you need to figure out the details of that, the nuances of that adventure and that situation yourself, but it's giving you stuff. It's giving you cool bits. So there's just so much here. You have Shadowfell Fog. You have Wild Magic Fog. Towards the end, you've got these entire underwater locations. Look at how long. I won't talk about them. Cove Reef. There's a map with interesting points, with skill checks that have to happen, with the various creatures and things that you might find there. What can you do here? This is Coral Reef. There's a lot there. That's an entire adventure in and of itself. Then you have the Wreck of the Marshall. It's like a shipwreck. Here's a full map. What's there? What's of interest? Oh, Harpy Rock, Upper Decks. What's in the cargo hold? St. Cuthbert's Shrine. What's in the crew quarters? What's in the passenger quarters? You have all this stuff. Then you get into another one. I mean, it's mentioning Vecna. Look how long this is. So there's so many little bits. You have the third one, which is called the Warthokeel Features. What's here? There's a whole map accompanying it. So you have a bunch of other, outside of the adventures in Saltmarsh itself, just other interesting bits and interesting things. So I can't, recommend this highly enough. There's so much just in this section alone, possibly $20 worth of content just here, let alone the various. I'm not going to run pre-published module stuff. I never do. So I won't use the adventures, but there's some cool bits there. But between this section here and all of the fuel it provides to me and how I can turn Saltmarsh into any port city and incorporate that into my own world, I have to give this a 5 out of 5 for content. So with all that being said, this is my final score. Thanks everyone for watching, and take care.